Assalamualaikum everyone. Welcome back to our show Unscripted on
America's Islamic Radio. I'm your host, Maria.
And I'm your host, Hanaa. And Maria and I are super excited because we're coming back from like a long hiatus of just doing nothing to actually getting back into interviewing people. So today we have a very special guest with us, Asma. I'm pronouncing that correct, right?
Yeah.
So Asma is a student at NYU, a junior, and she's also a very big activist, as well as she just started a podcast actually called Muslimah, right? And so it's on Spotify. So Assalamualaikum Asma, how are you?
Walaikum salam. I'm good. Just in Albany, New York currently because I'm going to be doing remote learning for the semester. So yeah, alhamdulillah, I'm doing well. I'm so glad to be here.
We're super excited to have you. So let's just get right into it. All right. So Asma, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, where you're from, what you're studying.
So I am like a Muslim Indian American. I was born and raised in New York State. Like you said, I'm a junior at New York University. I am on the pre-law track, so inshallah, I want to be a lawyer. Growing up, like I was always like I loved talking, I loved like debating. So I just really seemed like natural for me to like want to go into law. But as a pre-law major, like you can really do anything. So I've just decided to explore my own interests. So I'm doing public health and politics. So kind of a good mix and very, very relevant towards, what's going on in the world right now with coronavirus and everything. So yeah, that's like pretty much about me. In my free time, I like to run a lot. Like I run a 5K like every day or every other day. Yeah, and I love reading books in my free time too, hanging out with my siblings. Yeah, that's pretty much a little intro about me.
Okay, running a 5K, like that's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
I need to
You're everything I wish I could be. Like, I'm doing free law. I want to become a lawyer, inshallah, one day. And, like, running, that would be really cool.
Yeah.
I can't even
I did cross country in high school, so it's just something that's, like, ingrained in me, Like, it's actually, like, therapeutic for me to run now. Like, I used to hate it back in high school, but now it's, like, a part of my life. I don't know, so.
That's
awesome. Yeah.
That's really cool. So, Asma, you were introduced to us as an activist. Could you tell us a little bit about that realm or that part of your life, and what are some of the current issues that you're addressing?
Sure. So I guess I kind of started like advocating for different issues in high school, and it just kind of like went into my college experience as well, just because I can't not use my voice when there's something out there that bothers me, or like not even bothering me, bothering other people. Like if there's an injustice happening against a group in this country or anywhere in the world, like I feel like not using my own voice and uplifting the voices of others is a waste of my effort. You know what I mean? So I kind of started out my activism, or like really getting more into it, I would say in the March for Our Lives movement. I don't know if you guys remember that in 2018 when there was a shooting in Florida, in Parkland, Florida, at high school, and there was a whole March for Our Lives movement. So I kind of started out with that. I led the whole protest up here in Albany because I wasn't at NYU at the time. And that kind of like really started my like role as an activist. After that, I really got involved with, like, the fight for Palestinian liberation. I went to a lot of protests and, like, different meetings for that. And obviously that's more of an ongoing fight. It's not really something that, the issue just gets solved right away. We're always fighting for the Palestinian people. Also, I'm a really big environmental activist. My parents are always like, you're always talking about the environment. Like, I don't let anyone use the, like, plastic water bottles when we don't have to. So for that, like, that's something I'm always really passionate about. I work a lot with Faithfully Sustainable. I don't know if you guys have heard of them, but they're like a new nonprofit, like that's kind of emerged out of the New York City area where we are. And it's just this amazing collective of, students and Black and brown, like, people of color just coming together to talk about the environment and how it relates to Islam. So it's just like such an awesome organization. I would recommend you follow them on Instagram. So I've been working with them a lot. And then obviously, recently with the Black Lives Matter movement, I unfortunately wasn't able to like take as big of a role as I wish I could have, just because of the virus, and like I have someone immunocompromised in my house, so I couldn't really get out there as much as I wanted to. But yeah, that's like basically the gist of it. When I see something out there that's an injustice, I just feel the need to use my voice. And I think NYU, like attending a school like NYU's has really been a blessing, because there's always so much going on over there. There's always like, something happening, or like issues are always being brought up that aren't necessarily being brought up in other places. So yeah.
I have to commend you, and not to like embarrass you or put you on the spot or anything, but I mean, you are technically on the spot because you were interviewing me, but I have to commend you, because I feel like even today, like despite the fact that we're in the 21st century, we're so technologically advanced, people have like, quote unquote, like very modern mindsets, right? But still, there are so many people of our generation that don't speak out against the injustices. And then they kind of hide behind that, that label of like, oh, these are uncomfortable things. You don't feel comfortable talking about this.
Right.
Something, I don't feel qualified to talk about.
Yeah.
But what they're doing is they're like setting up that barrier to, that wall that basically stops them from educating themselves about,
right.
I feel like the first step into being an advocate is actually knowing what you're advocating for,
right?
Learning about it.
Yeah, educating yourself. And one of the issues that we really, really don't talk about, especially in like the I speak for the Desi community just because I'm a part of it. Domestic abuse in our households, and it happens. Like, it's not like it never happens. And it's something that just kind of gets swept under the rug sometimes. And it's just like, it's fine. But these, women and men who are being abused in their households really need help, and they really need outreach. This past Ramadan, like in the last 10 days of Ramadan, I did like a fundraiser for women facing domestic abuse in the New York area. And I said that if I raised $3,000, that I would let my brothers and my dad do my makeup on Eid. And mashallah, like I that was a good enough incentive for people. Throughout the whole last 10 days, everyone was like Venmoing me, and I was giving the money like directly to the organization that needed it. It's called Turning Point New York. They're also located in the New York area. And then my brothers and my dad did my Eid makeup as promised. So alhamdulillah, like that's another issue that like I forgot to mention, but it's something that is really, really not talked about. So
yeah, and I just want to add before I go back to the next question, but even with like the Black Lives Matter movement, that's been, it's always been there, right? But recently, because of what happened, all the killings, the brutality and stuff, because of that, I feel like you kind of see, different colored communities reacting differently. Also, I'm Pakistani, so I'm also part of the South Asian community. And I was kind of surprised by some of the reactions that came from, like, Pakistani people as well. When it came to this, despite living in America, you see kind of the small mindsets, I guess you can call them, the closed off kind of mindset, where they just don't want to be involved. They don't want to say that this is injustice. And I feel like part of it comes from the fact that, they consider this country home, but then there's also there are other people who don't consider us members of this country. So if we say something, they might get mad. They might so it's really, really.
I think it's interesting. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
So I think it's interesting, like the dynamic between the old and the new generation. Although like kind of like what you said, there's still people who hide behind a mask, especially in our generation, and like don't feel qualified enough to say certain things. I do feel like our generation is much better in terms of advocacy from the last generation. Like, I think we're doing much better in terms of voicing our opinions and really standing up for what we think is right compared to the old generation. That might be because our parents came from, like, a lot of colored parents tend to come from countries where there is more of like a republic than a democracy, and they don't feel like oftentimes they can voice their opinions. So I do appreciate our generation for at least making that effort. I think that's cool.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. Yeah.
And so the next question is one of my favorites, I guess, because I like learning about these different kinds of experiences Muslim woman kind of face. So what is it like being not just a Muslim but also a hijabi in the US today?
So I think I have a different experience than a lot of people who grew up in like big cities, because I grew up in Albany, and mashallah, we actually have a lot of Muslims here now. And people really feel like are much more open to like diverse people. But when I was going to school in that area, it was like very like homogenous in terms of race. It was mostly like a white area in the elementary school I was going to. It was definitely hard. I started wearing hijab in 5th grade, and it was definitely like a struggle. Like people would like look at me and they'd be like, what is that? Like, why do you wear that? Like even like my teachers, my friends, like everyone. But like you find little pockets of support, you know what I mean? Like one day, like you have spirit days in school. Like one girl, like there was a twin day, right? She wore a hijab with me like the whole day to be my twin. Like, so like there's people who like come, like really like show their support, and then there's people who don't, you know what I mean? So you really have to like be proud of who you are, be confident in who you are, and then it really shows, because people knew that I was confident in my hijab and I was confident in my Muslimness, and that if they ever had a question, they could always ask me, you know what I mean? And when they saw that, they were like, okay, she's confident in who she is, so like I can't really do anything about that, you know what I mean? Even if they were opposed to me being Muslim, they couldn't say anything, because they knew that I would, if they did, I would like fight back with like a logical agreement. Like I wasn't not confident, you know? So I don't know if that like makes sense, but like as I went on, like it was a good experience. Like alhamdulillah, there was I actually talk about this in my podcast, but I remember also in high school there was a substitute teacher who came to me, and I was like kind of like leading the class on a project we were doing while the substitute teacher was there, and he was like, "You're like so loud for the girls like you," and he like kind of pointed to the hijab, like meaning like hijabi girls are always like quiet and like subdued. He's like, most of you are so like easygoing and like quiet, like you talk so much, you're so outgoing. And I was like, what? Like, so he was like basically stereotyping me because I was a hijabi Muslim girl, and I was like leading the class because we all had to get something done. He was surprised that I was speaking up, and that's like the premise of why I did this podcast. Like I want to undo that stereotype, because Muslim women are out there like doing great things, so we have to make sure that we show the world who we are, and that like we're not this like oppressed group of women that are just like stay quiet, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's really interesting, because I feel like this leads into our next question, which is really, what was the thing that inspired you to start your Muslimah podcast?
Oh yeah, so by the way, Muslimah is available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, like wherever you can find it, so feel free to check it out. I just started it like a month ago, and I've really been thinking about it since quarantine started, because I've always like I said at the beginning of this, I like love having conversations with people. I love talking. It's just like something I like to do, and I love learning about other people. And I kind of missed that, because at NYU, like when I was in the city, I met new people every day. Like I heard about their experiences, I heard about their life, like I heard about their struggles. Like it was just so enlightening to me. And then I realized that like I'm in quarantine, and also like this podcast gives me the ability to talk to people like all across the country, because you can record a podcast with anybody like virtually through your phone. So this really gave me the opportunity to like use my connections, like find these Muslim women and share their stories, because a lot of times there's this, like I said, the stereotype that Muslim women just sit home and like don't do anything, or like just listen to the men that are in their lives and just kind of like let them dictate everything, and unfortunately that stereotype is furthered by laws in other countries that are not America, but that oppress Muslim women. So so I really wanted to undo that stereotype by showing like how powerful we are and like all the great things that we're doing. Like we have so many Muslim women in politics, we have so many Muslim women lawyers, chefs, like etc., and they're making impacts in their community. Even if it's in their local community, that's still a really big deal, So that was like my inspiration. I like basically started out with women that I already knew that were like my family friends or whatever. Like it's easier than you think to start something like this. Like I want everyone watching to know that like I'm not some like, you know what I mean? I'm just a college student. Like it's easy to start these types of things. So if you want to start something, like anything, like a clothing brand or whatever, like just start, because I was really nervous to start this podcast, but like it's actually been going really well, alhamdulillah. So yeah.
And I want to chime in and say that I've listened to your podcast. Again, like totally putting you on the spot, but it's amazing. Like, it's something I feel like, sometimes when you hear people talking, you kind of just zone out, if you get really deep into details and stuff like that. But your podcast is really engaging, and I feel like the guests that you've had so far have been, very unique. The experiences that they have, everyone's so different, and it's so nice to learn. I I never used to be like a big public speaker and stuff like that. I mean, ever since I started college, I feel like I've been more into it, and I've recently, starting conversations with people has become easier, which is really nice because you kind of open, like you said, learning other people's struggles, their experiences, and not just people in the Muslim community, but like non-Muslims. Mari and I go to Stony Brook. Stony Brook is super diverse, with not just like people of different races, different religions, everyone. So I think your podcast is amazing. So I recommend everyone listening to it. You drop a new episode every Wednesday, I believe.
Yes. So yeah, and every Wednesday there's a new episode. So yeah.
All right. So that's all we have for today, guys. Thank you so much again for tuning into our show, Unscripted, on
America's Islamic Radio. I'm your host, Maria.
And I'm your host, Hanaa. And Asma, thank you so much again for joining us. This
of course.
Really, really amazing. Really enjoyed it. And we wish you all the best in your podcast and all of your future.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Take care, everyone. Assalamualaikum.
Assalamualaikum.